Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal. The patch 9.1.5 is literally days away from the release. However, Blizzard is continuing to make updates and changes and buffs and nerfs to a variety of different classes. Earlier in the week, Blizzard decided to do some bug fixing for classes on the PTR. However, the biggest bug they had to fix was apparently Hunter's performance inside of Mythic Pluses by making them worse, because I guess they were doing too well. Well, the nerf that happened to the Hunters has actually gotten reversed, and it didn't even take more than a day. We also got a variety of different PvP adjustments, some buffs for classes that are not super popular or somewhat underperforming within PvP, as well as a nerf that I think a lot of you guys will be happy with. We also got a brand new mount that was added to the game and we'll talk about in this video as well. But first, most of you guys watching these videos are not subscribed, so if that's you, you might as well hit subscribe as well as hit the bell, especially if you enjoy the regular updates on the channel for World of Warcraft, as well as any future updates for patch 9.2 whenever that gets in the works. We're gonna start this video off with the Binding Shot on Nerf. Originally, Blizzard nerfed the Binding Shot ability to make it interact like every other root in the game. Mages, Freezing Nova, or Entangle roots from Druids, all these roots break after the target takes a little bit of damage. So Blizzard made a change on PTR where Binding Shot was also going to start breaking from damage as well. Although they did mention the threshold for that damage would be higher when tested on PTR, it wasn't that much higher. So Hunters were looking at first like they were going to lose one of the biggest utilities when it comes to bringing something to the table inside of Mythic Plus scenarios. This nerf has been removed, and Blizzard even stated in the developer's note, due to an oversight when changing Binding Shot from a stun to a root. I even forgot that this ability used to be a stun. Binding Shot was not updated to obey normal root rules. During our bug fixing process, we updated to break damage in 9.1.5. However, we realized that this is a big change and that Binding Shot has become a powerful tool for Hunters. As a result, we're reverting this change and allowing Binding Shot to not break on damage. So Binding Shot used to stun at some point, and they nerfed it to be a root, so they were looking to nerf it yet again. And maybe understandable in terms of having a root that doesn't break at all is maybe a little strong in Mythic Plus scenarios or AoE scenarios in general. However, doing this nerf as 9.1.5 is about to release, literally days before releasing, might have been a bad idea. So if they might address this in the future, and they still might nerf it in one way or another at some point, but as of right now they're leaving it alone, which is probably the best case scenario. We'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on the nerf initially, and if they are going to be nerfing it, how should they change it in the future if they don't want it to be a permanent root. We also have PvP updates this week, which is weird because the 9.1.5 patch is really right around the corner. I'm still half expecting for them to sneak in a couple of last minute class changes for PvE or PvP. Hard to tell if it's going to be anything that changes the meta, but I definitely wouldn't be surprised if they decide just to sneak in a load of changes at the very last second. They've kind of been doing a lot of changes this week in general. Take a look at these recent PvP changes. We got some changes to Death Knights, Hunters, as well as Monks, buffs, as well as nerfs. For Death Knights, we start off with Frost Death Knight, where Frost Strike is seeing a PvP multiplier go from 1 to 1.3. This looks to me like a 30% damage buff for Frost Strike, whether it's main hand or offhand. Frost Strike is generally not an ability Death Knights use often. From what I've been told by Frost Death Knights that play competitively in PvP, it's usually better to just save and bank runic power for a Death Strike in PvP so you can just kind of heal the damage, because Frost Strike just doesn't really feel worth the runic power. As Death Knight's only runic power spender, that's a pretty bad deal. So they are buffing it by 30%. It's hard to tell if Frost Strike will all of a sudden become a really good ability or will become really strong as part of your damage burst toolkit, but hopefully this adjustment at least makes this ability a little bit more viable as a base runic power spender. For Unholy Death Knights, which is still not a very popular spec even though it got some 9.1 changes, we're seeing Death Coil and Virulent Plague, the base dot for Unholy Death Knights. Both are getting the same treatment of a PvP multiplier going from 1.0 to 1.3, so it looks like a 30% damage buff for both of those abilities. Virulent Plague buff is actually quite good because that's going to increase the sustain damage of an Unholy Death Knight. Death Coil is increased to sustain, but also it seems like an increase to some burst damage, since there are some combinations for Unholy Death Knight with normal talents as well as PvP talents where they can send a bunch of Death Coils for a little bit of extra burst into the target. So this is looking like an interesting change, and hopefully will bring up some of the base damage of Unholy Death Knights. It's only 2 abilities that are getting buffed, yet quite often used abilities in PvP, so hopefully we'll at least see improvements when it comes to Unholy Death Knights and their representation in battlegrounds and maybe even arenas. We got some hunter changes primarily for marksmanship hunter as well as some pet updates. For marksmanship hunters, we're seeing a very similar thing as Death Knights. We're seeing PvP multipliers for aim shot getting adjusted, where aim shot is looking like it's going from a 1.1 PvP multiplier to a 1.15, which sounds to me like a 5% damage buff for aim shot. Rapid fire is seeing a very similar change, where it goes from a 1.0 to a 1.1 PvP multiplier. So it looks like a 10% buff damage for rapid fire. Two of your bursty abilities, aim shot and rapid fire, it looks like marksman is going to be hitting a little bit harder in PvP. But it doesn't stop there, because arcane shot also got buffed from a 1.2 to a 1.3 PvP multiplier. So a 10% buff damage there. Technically, arcane shot can be used by marksmanship hunters, but also beast mastery hunters and survival hunters, but I don't think survival is picking up the bow anytime soon, and I doubt beastmaster hunters are tired of spamming cobra shot, so it is generally a marksman PvP buff. However, if you feel like your pet has been kind of having a hard time surviving in PvP as any spec a hunter, they are changing mend pet. Previously, this ability was a magic dispelled ability, and a shaman or a priest could purge it off of your pet. So it meant that your pet had a harder time surviving whenever getting focused. Now, mend pet can no longer be dispelled, and that means better survivability for any pet that you choose within PvP. However, if your pet does die, at least they're changing their revive pet cast time from 4 seconds to 3 seconds, so if your pet does perish, you at least are able to get him back up and running slightly quicker. I think the hunter pet changes are actually going to be quite significant. Having your pet survive a little bit longer means your utility that comes from your pet, or the damage or whatever buffs you get or stuns, all that is going to be more readily available as long as you remember to mend your pet. Finally, we have the first nerf of this list, and that's going to come from Monk's Necrolord Bone Dust Brew. We're seeing the whole Covenant ability for all 3 specs, Bone Dust Brew PvP multiplier, go from 1.0 to 0.666666, repeating of course. So this is looking like a 33%, maybe more or less a 34% nerf towards Bone Dust Brew within PvP. This is quite significant because Bone Dust Brew as a Necrolord PvP monk is actually quite huge. It's a good portion, a massive portion of their burst damage. Monks, in fact, are actually pretty scary in PvP. They have Zuen, which can do quite a bit of extra burst damage. He'll leap on you, do damage himself, and whatever you do damage to an enemy, the Zuen will replicate it to the target. Storm, Earth, and Fire will let the monks split themselves, and these images that you split yourselves into, all of you do quite a bit of damage. So you have your on-use trinket, you have a legendary that gives you critical strike, and then you also have Bone Dust Brew as one of those abilities as part of that equation. Bone Dust Brew is a very powerful toolkit. What it does is whenever it debuffs the enemy with the Bone Dust Brew, every time you do damage to the enemy, it has a 50% chance to copy a portion of that damage as shadow damage. Normally baseline, the copy damage is at 35% effectiveness, but with the conduit you can increase that shadow damage quite significantly, so that 35 can become 40 and maybe even 50 very quickly. If you ever gotten hit with a massive Rising Sun kick from a monk, maybe with one set of Storm, Earth, and Fire, maybe with just a Zuen, combining Bone Dust Brew on top of that big kick and it procs, that could be a one-shot. That could be literally your whole health bar. Monks are really scary because they have so many different parts of puzzles they can just put together and call it burst, and they will do a lot of damage every single time. So Blizzard is nerfing one of the pieces of the puzzle that they can put together, that is Bone Dust Brew within PvP. This is going to be pretty significant. I don't really know if monks are ever going to stop being strong in PvP with this change. They're still probably going to wipe the floor with you plenty of times. But this change is actually a pretty significant one, and will make the burst inside of Bone Dust Brew a little bit less scary. Finally, we have a brand new cat mount being added in the game. And don't get me wrong, I get you. I am not a big fan whenever they add mounts to the store either. I think they're much better used whenever a cool mount is added in the game for you to be able to earn through like an in-game event or some kind of like a difficult challenge. Something that's a little bit more difficult than swiping your credit card. But also, this mount is a cat. People love cats, especially online. It's a massive cat. It's just like a normal house cat, just big with a saddle. Like, I think they knew what they were doing. They were like, okay, we'll add a store mount. Okay, everybody's gonna hate it, but what if it's a cat? This cat doesn't seem to be anything related toward Shadowlands. It just seems like its own model with its own skeleton. So of course, players, after playing the last previous expansions, have started guessing that what if this mount is some way a hint towards the next expansion, because they've done it before. During Warlords of Draenor, they released a Mystic Runesaber mount as well as an AOTC mount for Hellfire Citadel, which was a moose. It had no resemblance towards fighting the Legion and the demons, and the mount you got was a moose. And those were some of the mounts we were actually able to get in Legion, with Night Sabers being ridden by the Nightborn and moose all over the place in High Mountain. During Legion for one of the BlizzCons, if you got the ticket, you got the Sky Chaser Stormwind mount or Orgrimmar Interceptor mount, both of them hinting at the faction conflict that would come in Battle for Azeroth. During Battle for Azeroth, we got the Vulpine Familiar and Silvarian Dreamer, a dragon and a fox mount which are literally scattered everywhere all over Ardenweald. Now, it could be that they just made this stuff because they thought it was really cool, and then they came up with a faction idea, and then they just reused some of these models. Maybe given a moose when you defeat Archimonde in Hellfire Citadel was just random, and then they just came up with Legion. Or maybe they already have an idea what the next expansion might be, and this mount hints at what the next expansion could be. Now, it's all up to the players to figure out the hints, figure out what this may mean, and what the symbolism could be. And this is the best part, is just everybody taking a stab at it. Everybody taking a guess, coming up with what the next expansion could be based on some of these small hints we've had so far. Could these hints be related? Yes. But also, could they be completely random? Also yes. But I still like to imagine that maybe there's just a kernel of spoiler somewhere in there, because that's just more fun that way. So if we were to take a guess, earlier in the weeks of Shadowlands, they did release a Sapphire Skyblazer, which is a blue raven, usually put on the background of the night sky and stars. Even the animation, the special animation for this mount, has it flying up and just kind of sparkling in an explosion of stars and blue. The cat is the direct opposite. While the raven is blue with cool colors and depicted along night sky, the cat has more warmth, more sun, and is more orange. Maybe they're both hinting at future factions that could potentially be riding these mounts or have them as regular pets in the future. Or maybe these could be mounts that would be in another realm. This leads me back towards some of the quote-unquote spoilers that players had during Legion and Battle for Azeroth, that the next expansion for World of Warcraft will end up being the Void versus the Light, with the Naru and the Lightforged leading the faction of the Light, and the Ethereals and certain Void Lords leading the faction of the Void. You'd have the Light and the Void fighting some kind of another colossal threat. What these spoilers will also mention is that players will be able to choose to be part of the different factions, the Void or the Light. So you could be a Horde and Alliance, but also you could be part of the same faction, which would kind of break up the faction dichotomy and make it about the Void versus the Light rather than Horde versus Alliance. It's not really that much of their spoilers, but I think they were more wishful thinking by fans of the player base, but they definitely did try to upgrade an idea of what if we didn't play up to the factions and we just had some sort of a faction reset for one reason or another. So that's the best I could come up with. The bird is blue, the cat is orange. Maybe they're supposed to be related in that regard, that they're supposed to be opposing one another. Plus also cats and birds are not really the biggest friends, you know, one needs the other. So maybe two factions are going to spring up in the next expansion. That's my best tinfoil hat theory. And sorry for going on for a long while with this, but if you guys have your own tinfoil hat theories of what this could mean, what could these mounts mean for the potential future expansion, give me your best shot, give me your best idea. I would love to read some of them in comments. And as per always, thank you guys so much for checking out this video. I'm going to wrap it up here. Link towards the YouTube Discord, the channel Discord down below if you guys want to join it. All of you are welcome to be part of the community. Thank you all so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you enjoyed this video and the updates, give it a thumbs up. And I'll see all of you guys in another video.